Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the LeanTossup College Football Podcast, Week 9. I am joined, of course, by my co-host at BuckMetrics, and we're here for Part 2. If you want to go back and listen to Part 1, we basically recap what happened in Week 8. We talk about a lot of the games and the scores and implications for a lot of those going forward. Here we're going to talk in Part 2. We're going to do our Narduzzi Awards of the Week, our deep dives, and our picks for Week 9. So, uh, what have you got here for our Narduzzi's for this week?
Okay, well, if you missed it in part one, we actually had an interesting conversation about Akron and their the sneaky progress they're making. So, I've got a quote here from Akron first year head coach Joe Moorhead after a tough one score loss to Kent State. Quote: "We have good players. We are right there. We are not getting run out of the stadium. You make a play or two, and you can get over the hump."
It's inspirational, very inspirational by
Yeah.
Akron.
Except you know what? I don't know if you know this.
Yeah, I do actually.
That was not Joe Moorhead. That was Jimbo Fisher, fifth-year head coach of Texas A&M after losing to South Carolina. Is this what they are paying for? Not getting run out of the stadium against South Carolina?
God, I mean, again, we were on South Carolina plus 3.5 and the money line cashed relatively easily. Again, it's just stuff. This should not be happening. Like it's just like they're earning so much money. I can't like, and not the players per se. Like Jimbo Fisher obviously is earning, like they should be doing better than this. South Carolina is not a sneakily good team. Like they should
No.
not be. This should not be happening. They should be able to beat teams like South Carolina relatively easily. These should not be close games.
Yeah, somebody mentioned to me, I can't believe this. Have you seen Spencer Rattler's stats for this season?
No.
They are brutal. Let me just pull this up real quick. Just horrible.
Well, the
Um,
thing is, as you're calling up, I'll just kind of add something to this
yeah.
too. There are still people online who are talking because there. I mean, to be fair, I absolutely do love PFF. I think they're some of the smartest people in the industry, not just in on the college side and the NFL side. But I'm still seeing people drag them on Twitter for their graphic of last year, saying about like potential round one NFL quarterbacks and like their number one quarterback was Spencer Rattler. Now, I mean, here's the thing: we could talk about Spencer Rattler in a second, but like that is in no way on PFF, right? They are talking, they are basically coordinating player grades and hype by draft. Like, so that's not, you cannot say PFF is a bad company because at one point last year they thought Spencer Rattler was a good quarterback. Like, that is not on PFF at all. But at the same time, though, man, like just the fall from grace. I mean, right? There was talk, serious talk. Again, PFF is a serious outlet of Spencer Rattler being a top whatever draft pick this year. He got benched in favor of Caleb Williams, who looks amazing now in USC. And what are his stats for this year? Now you go ahead with the stats.
Here we go. Completion percentage 63.6, good. Yards per attempt 7.5, good. Five touchdowns and eight interceptions.
Jeez.
Not too often you see the more interceptions than touchdowns. I'm not a huge believer in number of touchdown passes for quarterbacks, but when when you got almost twice as many interceptions, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And Jimbo and his defense couldn't beat that guy. Really well done, Jimbo.
Just yeah. I this A&M team, like, again, they lose by 6 to South Carolina, which again, like, sure, okay, maybe they almost won, but again, the 3.5 was never in question, right? So this
Yeah.
is it's crazy that, again, like, okay, so Haynes King actually had a not horrible day. Actually, Connor Wiegman, he was also not bad too. They threw for 269 yards, which is actually pretty high for them, and they ran for 129. Actually, they did
Such low
outgain. So
expectations.
yeah, they actually. I mean, yeah, like wow, they threw for almost 300 yards in a college football game. That's crazy, but like that's high for them. But like, yeah, they actually did outgain South Carolina. But again, though, like just there's so little execution on this team. They just don't know what they're doing. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
I want to repeat what you just said. Wow, they actually outgained South Carolina. We're not saying, yeah, they actually outgained Tennessee. Wow, they outgained Georgia. They outgained South Carolina.
Well,
Well done.
there's two prongs to that, right? Because it's on one hand, it's like I'm saying that as a fact, but also like I'm surprised by that fact. I'm like, wow, they I
Yeah.
can't believe they did that. Like that's
Yeah.
the level of expectation on this team, and it's It's just completely insane how far we've come from. I mean, there was serious talk about this Texas A&M team and how this Texas A&M team might actually be not like might be an actually pretty half decent team.
Yeah,
And
what were they preseason? Fifth?
something like well, it was obviously like super fraudulent, but like there was talk about them eventually competing for a national championship in a couple of years, and like we're not there now.
No. Maybe they're getting all the losses out of the way.
Yes,
Um, so okay, my second Narduzzi. This kind of pains me because he was a very good defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He went into a rough spot at Eastern Michigan and really struggled there. Purdue defensive coordinator Ron English. Um, just gonna tell you that Graham Mertz was 13 of 21 for over 200 yards. Not acceptable.
they did pretty much crush Purdue though, which was weird. Um,
Yeah,
oh yeah, I mean they did lose to Purdue, but like again, yeah, Graham Mertz had a actually not horrible day, which is not you're not supposed to do that. Like that's like a 60 some odd percent completion percentage. It's like
almost 10 per attempt.
yeah,
What happened to the Purdue defense?
yeah,
Ron English. I liked you. I don't like you as much now.
yeah, this Purdue team again massively underperforming. Like I had this as a pick. I picked Purdue, just massive underperformance. Just and again, this Wisconsin team is now super Jekyll and Hyde, right? Like they come out there and they're like, okay, we're gonna absolutely crush Northwestern. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. It was Northwestern. Good
Join the
job to
club.
you. Lose to Michigan State in overtime, which they should have lost in regulation to Michigan State, but then they had to drag it out to overtime. They lose to 7.5 point favorites. Then they crush Purdue as basically even. So like, is Wisconsin gonna get blown out this week? Like, is that? I think that's the next logical progression here. I think I don't know. They might not. I don't think they actually play this week. So, but it's this Wisconsin team is just so Jekyll and Hyde. I have no idea what they're gonna do next.
Well, in fairness, their quarterback, you know, you can't rely on him to do any other than well, he didn't throw an interception this game, so we can't even count on him to do that all the time now.
Yeah, I remember saying that. I'm like, oh, I should bet on him for the interception prop, and I was like, nah, I wouldn't. And thank God I did because he didn't get it. Graham Mertz is consistently inconsistent.
Yeah. All right, my next Narduzzi. This this program has an interim coach. I can tell you that they are definitely not going to hire Scott Frost. University of Alabama, Birmingham is 4-0 in games decided by 14 or more points. 0-3 in games decided by one score. That's not fun.
That is not fun. No, that again, you make the Scott Frost joke there because that is eerily reminiscent of our favorite ex coach of Nebraska, Scott Frost, right? And it's like I think like in the NFL when you have an NFL team that loses a bunch of one score games, there's a lot of like hype paid to them because it's like, oh well, assuming average performance, those one score wins or one score losses will kind of even out. But maybe like there is something to that one score loss in college where like coaching does count. Like you can stack
Yeah.
up an entire score to that to a good coach or not, right? And maybe there is something more to that on college football level. Like I think a lot of the analysis is like, okay, well, if like say one team loses a bunch of one score games one year, then the next year maybe they'll win more of them than lose them, right? So maybe they'll get opposite luck. Maybe in college, maybe that's not necessarily maybe that's not necessarily indicative of a good coach. Maybe it's like if you're a bad coach, you'll lose those one score games, and then you'll just continue losing them, right?
In particular, in this case, you've got a first-time head coach who's taken over for Bill Clark, who was just an awesome, totally underrated all-time head coach. So I think there's a lot of that in play too, where this guy's just going to figure out what it is to be a head coach. Lastly, New Mexico has scored 18 points in the last two games. Why do I bring that up? Well, that's basically since they fired their offensive coordinator. Clapping for them. Good job. Way to turn it around, guys. 9 points a game. Everything's going great down in New Mexico.
That guy was definitely the problem.
Yes, problem solved. So, you have a deeper dive?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the Heisman race. So at about this point, when we're definitely past the mid-season point, definitely towards the later part of the season, this is where the Heisman race starts heating up, right? And obviously the lines surprisingly at the top at least haven't moved a ton. After kind of I think after ever since basically week 2 when Texas almost upset Alabama, Bryce Young has fallen pretty far. So I'll just give a state of the board right now. You've got CJ Stroud at minus 110, very high basically the favorite at minus 110, basically pricing at about 60ish, 50 60 55 60% give or take somewhere around there. Then you've got Hendon Hooker 2 to 1 about 30%. Then it tapers off far. Then you got Caleb Williams at 12 to 1. Blake Corum, that's the running back from Michigan, he's at 14 to 1. Bryce Young, obviously from Alabama, 20 to 1. And then Bo Nix, quarterback Oregon, 35 to 1. Then you've got some further one out. You got Jameer Gibbs, 40 to 1. Stetson Bennett, 40 to 1. And Drake Mane, 40 to 1. Spencer Sanders, 50 to 1. Hartman, 50 to 1. And then Max Dugan, TCU, 50 to 1. I'll stop it there because that's kind of the last one I really want to talk about. So, going back in the CFP era, which is again only really existed since 2017, in the 2017 era, anybody who has won the Heisman has been on a team that has made the college football playoff since the CFP era. So 2017, Baker Mayfield won the Heisman. That was in Oklahoma. They went to the CFP. 2018, Kyler Murray, Oklahoma. They went to the CFP. Joe
Mm.
Burrow went to the CFP and won it. In 2019, he was the Heisman. 2020, Devonta Smith from Alabama. That was the year with Mac Jones and Devonta Smith and Najee Harris. They won. That was the year that they went. They won the whole. He won the high. Devonta Smith won the Heisman. They won the whole thing. Last year it was Bryce Young and Alabama team that again went to the finals but lost to Georgia in the finals. So generally, what you want to look for is you want to look for a player on a team that is one of the best players in the game, but also on one of the best teams in the game. So again, kind of like the MVP as well. Which is again, I fundamentally hate awards like this. I fundamentally hate the concept of that MVP is defined as the best player on one of the best teams rather than just the best player, period. And I've had this conversation a lot in Call of Duty because it's very clearly like there's a really good player on a bad team, but then they don't get any notice for MVP. So, but again, same kind of here. So what are we looking at this here? Well, you can functionally treat basically any one of these bets as additionally a bet on that team to make the college football playoff, right? So, for example, CJ Stroud minus 110 to win the Heisman. So that implies that you've got about a 60% chance of Ohio State making it to the CFP. So that now to do that, they need to beat Penn State this week. Probably will. They're 15.5 point favorites. Then they've got to beat Michigan in the last regular season game of in the basically the big game, the last game of the last week of the regular season. But then if they
Do they?
don't, hmm?
Sorry.
Oh, okay,
I think you're going. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, if they don't win that game, then their season is done functionally. Then they're going to a bowl game and they won't win it. But if they have to beat Michigan, and then they just have to clean up whatever's left of the Big Ten West, then then he probably would win that. So that's you're basically betting minus 110 on a money line bet of Ohio State versus Penn State, Ohio State versus Michigan, and then whatever Ohio State versus whatever comes out of the Big Ten West. That's not great, I would say, because again, now to be fair, Ohio State is massively favored in those games, but as we talked about earlier in part 1, CJ Stroud has had problems against half decent defenses. One of those, most notably, was actually Penn State last year and also Michigan last year, right? I mean, again, I know we're not really allowed to talk about a particular team's offense, but like, again, and I'll very briefly kind of touch on this. How much closer is that game if they're actually able to put on any sort of offensive pressure at all, right? They don't lose by
Yeah.
44, right? If they're able to put on a long drive and shorten the game clock and actually score, Bryce Young is actually under pressure. And that's a problem. And if there isn't a pick six, like CJ Stroud would actually be put under pressure and he could crack. And again, this week against Penn State, 15.5, I'm not touching it. I think it's a couple too many points. But again, I could be wrong, but again, if Ohio State loses to Penn State, then your minus 110's gone. Now, Hendon Hooker, again, this is an interesting one, 2 to 1. That's actually basically their price to make the CFP. If you look at, I have props to make the
Hmm.
playoff. Ohio State is minus 600 to make the playoffs. So Tennessee is plus 175 to make the playoffs. Hendon Hooker to win the Heisman is 2 to 1. Now, Hendon Hooker is interesting because this 2 to 1 bet is functionally a either they beat Georgia in 2 weeks, and then they beat Alabama or SEC West team, probably likely Alabama, or the bet would be they lose to Georgia and then Georgia beats Alabama. Because if Georgia were to beat Alabama, you would then probably have a Georgia and a Tennessee team in the college football playoff, and then two-loss Alabama would stay home. So you're only getting plus 200 on those things to happen, which I don't think any of them are like particularly likely because I mean currently Georgia is 11-point favorites against Tennessee, and like you're 11 points is is functionally a what? 11 points is what? At least 3-1. You're not getting like you're at least getting 3-1 on a 10-point dog.
Yeah,
So if you really want that, just bet Tennessee money line against Georgia because if they lose to Georgia, he's not going to win the Heisman. So then we get to Caleb Williams, 12-1. Well, the problem is he going to make the college football playoff? That's a little iffy.
it's tough. Yeah.
It's tough. He could, but he needs some chaos to happen. Blake Corum, Michigan. This isn't that bad, right? He's looked pretty good. He's
Mm-hmm.
been a great running back. Sometime now in the modern era, and is in defining modern as only from 2017 on, they've given it to four quarterbacks, one wide receiver. The last time they gave it to a running back was 2015, but that was literally Derrick Henry. So tough task there. The last one was 2009 with Alabama, Mark Ingram, right? So usually these are going to quarterbacks, and then again before that was Reggie Bush in 2005. So again, unless you're one of the greatest running backs ever of all time, you're generally not getting this award. But he could be, right? Bryce Young 20-1. I have a lot of questions about this Alabama team. I'm not loving it. Bo Nix 35-1. That's a little tempting, but the problem with that is that 35-1 probably also means that you're going to have to get a Clemson loss in there somewhere. Because if not, an undefeated Clemson will get it. And you probably also need some chaos to happen in the Big 12. Now, to be fair, it's the Big 12. Chaos is their sport as well. So generally, chaos will happen. But, I mean, that's the next kind of bet to look at. TCU, Max Duggan, 50-1. That's not bad. Like, if you have an undefeated TCU, if you have, let's say, an undefeated Georgia and a one-loss Tennessee, or you have an undefeated Tennessee, a one-loss Georgia, and a two-loss Bama, and like a one-loss undefeated Ohio State or an undefeated, like, I kind of think an undefeated TCU gets in there. I think, but this is where the rankings will matter, right? Like, I think TCU can finish the regular season undefeated, and at that point, I think if they do, then I think Max Duggan could be the Heisman winner. I think, especially if they make the college football playoff. But like if not, I think Bo Nix might be, and then if not, but like I don't want to lay the plus 200 with Hendon Hooker because if they just lose to Georgia, then you're dead, right? What are your thoughts on it? What I've said? Do you agree with anything I've said or not?
Yeah, that's interesting. First of all, when I was trying to pull up Max Dugan's stats, apparently there was a movie that came out in 1983 called Max Dugan Returns. Don't know how that hasn't made its way into this conversation as far as
Might be a
Big
very bad
12 football is
might be a very
concerned.
bad movie.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. I didn't know that Max Dugan left. He's got some really good stats. I think he wasn't really starting the season. Their start at the beginning of the
No,
season,
he
though. I
wasn't.
was trying to pull up the game log, and I don't know if that helps or not. Big 12 is a good conference this year. Um, I think, you know, I would have never, ever, ever. I mean, I stopped writing after Bo Nix just to show you like my first inclination. Yeah, I think there's value there. I think, is he a likely winner? No. Is he more likely than his odds imply? Yeah. Um, who do they have yet to play? This is interesting.
Let's they haven't played Texas yet, but I'm not.
Okay,
That's not
we'll get to
particularly.
that in a second. Don't worry, I've got that covered.
Well, no, yeah. In terms of just who they have to play, they do have to play Texas, but I wouldn't be the most worried about Texas.
Uh-huh.
Let's see who else they have. They have West Virginia, Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor, and Iowa State. So they've played the tougher end of the Big 12, right? They've played Oklahoma, they played Kansas, they played Oklahoma State, they played Kansas State. Like they played 4 straight weeks of ranked opponents, right? They've got West Virginia this week, that's not bad.
Yeah,
They got Texas Tech again, pretty good there. Texas
at
again,
home. Oh,
yep, that could be the Steve Sarkisian is fired game. Then you've got Baylor, then you've got Iowa State. So like, yeah, no, Like there's a ton of tape of Max Duggan scoring passing touchdowns. He's looked amazing in a lot of these plays. Like 19 touchdowns, one interception. That's really good stats. Like
That is. Um, also that game at Texas, if Texas hasn't just completely gone on the elevator shaft, that could be maybe a big-ish game, and he throws for like 500 yards, which wouldn't be out of the question since they don't really like to slow it down as a practice.
mhm,
Um, yeah. Um, you make a compelling case. The other one that I think I'm probably believe a little more than you is Corum. He doesn't have awesome stats, but I think with that finale against Ohio State, if he goes nuts. Now, in part one, I said that Ohio State might have the best defense of all time. Um, that might have something to do with I don't remember who they played, but maybe it had something to do with the quality of opponent. I think if Corum has like a 200-yard game, and if Michigan actually wins
wins.
by a not a close one, but if they really run away with it, that could I think, and this is from somebody who's had Ohio State number one all season and has them with a preseason ticket to win the national championship. Um, I'll put it this way: 14-1 doesn't seem um, representative of the likelihood of that happening. I think that that's more likely than is implied by 14-1.
And you do raise an interesting point about that too. And I had kind of forgotten about this point. And again, this is the thing, right? Ohio State has not been tested so far this year, with the only exception being Notre Dame, who had a good defense. And then again, last week they were tested for the first half against another good defense. Penn State this week. Remember their two losses last year, right? It was Oregon and Michigan. What did they do? Ran the ball. How many rushing yards did Oregon have in that game against them? How do I mean? Do you remember the big game last year? How many times did we see Gus Johnson yelling out Hassan Haskins? Like how many times did that happen, right? This is the thing. If there is a team, and again, they are weak to the run on defense and they struggle against elite defenses. That's kind of Michigan's thing, right?
Yeah,
So like, and this is why I'm a little skeptical of this Ohio State team. I think CJ Stroud is a good player, but again, see this thing, right? And this is where we need to see the committee and how they're going to do it. Now, again, this is why it's really dumb because in a 12 playoff year, all these teams should make it. We should see Ohio State and Michigan and Tennessee and Bama and Oregon and even USC. We should see all those teams in here. We shouldn't be worried about a fraudulent Clemson team potentially making it because they keep winning close one-score games against mediocre teams, right? We shouldn't have to worry about whether or not that Clemson team is going to get in, right? We should like at this point, and again, they're talking about this for 2024, so maybe only one more year of this, but like we should be talking now about like, oh man, you know what's going to be great? That TCU versus Clemson game is going to be awesome, right? We shouldn't have to be worrying about like praying for North Carolina
yeah.
to beat Clemson to hope that we don't have to see this fraudulent Clemson team. Like that's the thing, and thank God we're going to get this fixed. They're going to fix this soon, but like that the 12-team playoff can't come soon enough, in my opinion.
Exactly. Hey, one other thing in support of the case for quorum. Um, I don't have stats, but I'm just going to infer this. I think that Harbaugh is really preferring to run the ball in the red zone, given that Corum has 13 rushing touchdowns, and as a team, Michigan has only 11 passing touchdowns. So I think that there's a path too where he can just run up some gaudy touchdown numbers as well as yardage.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't think 2,000 yards and like maybe God like 25 or 27 touchdowns is out of the realm. You
Yeah.
have that, and then if you have a big win over Ohio State, that's
Well, then at that point, then you get to clean up whatever's out of the SEC, the Big Ten West, right? And then you're in the playoff, and then it
yeah.
doesn't matter, right? So, and God, who knows who's gonna make the
Oh,
playoff at that point? But Michigan definitely will, right? So, yeah, I'm not. I think you've convinced me on the because again, this week they're playing Michigan State, right? He could rack up some numbers against that pretty bad Michigan State defense, right? So, yeah, I think
nice.
you've convinced me on a Blake Corum play and a Max Dugan play. Let's see. Let's go with it. Yeah.
I'm curious what my guy has him at. I'll look that up later.
Yeah.
All right, my deeper dive. So Saturday, as we talked about in part one, in passing or more than
Yes.
passing, Texas lost to Oklahoma State 41-31. They gave a 14-point lead, which they had kind of late in the third quarter, and they were called for 14 penalties. Just to remind everybody, the weekend before that, they were extremely likely to beat last place Iowa State at home. Literally, a wide receiver jumped for a ball he didn't need to jump for, dropped it. He makes that catch. He walks into the end zone, and Iowa State wins. Um,
And a quick point there, they were
yes,
14.5 point favorites in that game too. Just putting the
yes,
one more nail in the coffin there. Go ahead.
yes. And Iowa State is winless in conference play too. This wasn't like they did this against TCU. And I remarked that's what Sark does, and we had a good chuckle about that because that's what Sark is great at, is making us chuckle. So, what exactly is it when I say that's what Sark does? What does that mean? What exactly is it that Sark does? So, first of all, when you hire Sark, he's going to increase the talent level. He recruits at an elite level, which makes this whole thing even more maddening. But we have to give him that. Um, his teams commit a lot of penalties. At Washington, this is where his team's ranked nationally in penalties: 86th, 79th, 89th, 120th, 119th. Then his full season at USC, they ranked 122nd. I can't chop up the following season where he was there part of the time, but I can tell you that they were heavily penalized as well in 2015. So what happens? The penalties and just being outcoached allows these lesser talented teams, which pretty much most teams are once he's got his guys in there. It allows these lesser talented teams to hang around. Prior to coming to Texas, so when we're talking at Washington, I'm throwing out 2009 and 2010 because I'm going to grant him that he came into a really rough situation. I think Washington was 0-12 the season before he came on board. So I'll strike 2009 and 10 from this analysis just to be fair to him. So starting from 2011 and moving forward, prior to coming to Texas, when he was favored by 10 to 20 points, he is 1-9 against the spread. Um, I and I can tell you firsthand as a USC fan that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm trying to remember the one that probably happened when he was at Washington. I doubt it happened when he was at USC. When he was a road favorite of 14 or more points, he was 1-2 straight up. The FBS average is to win over 90% of the time. Um, so he's just got this knack for really underperforming with very, very talented teams. If you also look at his two recruiting classes at USC, there are, I think, just in two classes, he's probably got about 7 or 8 guys that made the NFL, if not more. Um, and he's losing to Boston College. He's losing to Arizona State because he doesn't teach his guys to knock the ball down on fourth and goal when the clock is expiring against horrible Arizona State. Anyways, so um, he's let go at USC. I'm very glad he's sober. I hope he stays sober. I wish him nothing but best when it comes to that. He goes to Atlanta. He goes to Nick Saban, and I don't know what he learns there. He learns probably as much as apparently Jeremy Pruitt learned coaching for Nick Saban. So he gets hired by Texas. And so what happens in Texas? Well, more of the same. In conference games, the Big 12 is a pretty even conference. You've got, kind of two good teams at the top, although if we look realistically, you've probably got one superiorly talented team in Oklahoma and a superior talented underperforming team in Texas forever. So in Big 12 games since he's come, 5-9 against the spread. On the road, he is 1-5 in road games against the spread. Um, how is he being outcoached? What's some more evidence? In the Big 12 road games, this is insane. He's outscored by opponents 51-27 in the third quarter. He has not won a single quarter in any of those road games. Not one. It's unbelievable. You can't even follow it backwards into like a scoop and score or something. And let's not forget, at home last season, he lost as a 31-point home favorite to Kansas. Um,
In
when
one of
you
the
have
greatest games of all time.
it was awesome. In my data, I looked up when home teams are favored by 28 to 35. Um, the home team wins 97% of the time. And again, he found his way to be an outlier to the negative. So when I talk about this is what Sark does, that's what Sark does. And you look at the road woes that he has, look at the schedule. They still have road games against Kansas and Kansas State. I mean, these fit the profile to a T. Lesser talented, but extremely well coached teams. Keep your eye on those two games coming going forward.
Yeah, here's a side note here. You will not be able to keep me from betting on Kansas against like not a chance. Like there is nothing that I like. I will 100 like the second I see a line, I will bet it, and then just again and again. Like I don't like that is going to be an amazing game. Just it's just fantastic. I cannot wait until that game. It's going to be amazing. Because the thing of it is, this Kansas team is actually good. Like this Kansas team. I mean, they've
Yeah,
had a rough couple weeks, but like they're still gonna go. They're probably gonna go to a bowl. It's just still like a. It's just it's crazy how like good this team like and again it's like I mean, I don't think this Texas team is going to blow badly enough until then, but like there's a chance that you're definitely going to get points with TCU, like I thought like with Kansas. Like there is
yeah,
no way that the Kansas is going to be laying points, but like I could definitely see them winning the game, like 100%. So I just
absolutely.
I cannot wait to see what that spread's going to be. I'm so
To,
excited to see what the spread's going to be.
likewise, and to your point, I think there's going to be, God bless him, he's trying hard. There's going to be a lot of Jason Bean built into the year-to-date stats, and if they especially get Jalen Daniels back and he's not rusty, watch out.
Oh yeah.
Um, that is a coaching mismatch of the highest order. Lance Leipold against Sark, and just looking at the schedule, they're off this week. They're at Kansas State, which is not going to be an easy game. Then they host TCU. They're going to be so up for that game, and then you have to go to at Kansas. Now they're not going to overlook
Oh.
Kansas because Kansas beat them, but there's going to be some letdown um, after that TCU game, especially if TCU comes into that game undefeated, win or lose. There's going to be somehow there's going to be it's kind of a rough break for Texas in that your revenge game is going to be in such a, you know, I guess I call it refractory period game where you've just kind of had this huge home game against TCU.
One
It's
yeah, one thing
yeah,
I will say is that Texas currently is still second favorites to win the Big 12 at plus
I
225.
yeah,
TCU is the favorite obviously at plus 120, so they're still even, basically functionally even. Then you've got Texas at plus 225, Oklahoma State at 300, and Kansas State 800, and then just goes further from there. But like, how is Texas still the second? Like, did that just mean nothing? Just like it's fine. Like what? Like how much liability is on this Texas team? Like is there that much liability on this Texas team that they literally can't move them that far until they're like literally be like, oh, Texas is 3-1. Oh, they're good. Oh, they lost. They're mathematically eliminated from the Big 12. So now they're like we don't give you a line now. Like is that where we need to get? Like
it could literally be because this happened. I mean, it happens at USC traditionally and until now. Um, why hang a bigger number when people are, so much the public's going to take that side anyways? Why not just put it at a number where you're going to wind up and get the same amount of volume anyways?
that's fair, right? Yeah. What would you put the fair number at? Like if you were to make that line right now, like an actual fair number.
For them to win the Big 12,
Yeah.
God, I would book I would book action at probably plus 1500.
15. I go 8. I go plus 8. I go 8 to 1. Cuz there is like a mathematical path and like outside of TCU, like
Yes.
but this is the thing, right? This line implies that like TCU is laying like a field goal maybe? Maybe? Like is Texas isn't favored against TCU, are they? No.
No. There's no yeah,
But then
yeah.
why is TCU plus 120 then? Is it just like cumulative probability that like they'd lose a couple of games? What is
They just beat Oklahoma State. They've beaten Oklahoma State and Kansas State, the both two lost teams.
Well, yeah,
TCU
but
we're
then
talking about.
they should be. Is it just cumulative probability? Because they could theoretically, if they lost to like Texas or something, and then lost to like, if they had like two losses on their schedule, they could get locked out by like Oklahoma State or something. Is that what it's saying?
But you'd have to well, they have the tiebreaker against Kansas
And
State.
they actually have the tiebreaker against Oklahoma State too.
Ye
So I got nothing. I don't know
yeah,
what the
yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, Texas loses the tiebreaker to Oklahoma State. I mean, at a very minimum, they have to win at Kansas State. I mean, they have to win out. I
yeah
mean, they're not going to get there with three because they've had too many bad losses. I can't.
yeah
Yeah,
they
I would
currently
definitely book if you're going to say what would you book basically for Texas to go undefeated the rest of the way, which is kind of what they have to do at this point.
plus 225
Yeah,
apparently.
at 15 to 1, I feel very comfortable doing that, and maybe I lay some of that off on some high exposure games as hedges.
Yeah.
But yeah, that doesn't. Yeah, well, BBMI market's
Well
not
then
caught up to just what
no,
this coach is.
no 100%. But then at that point, then if like because we're so far off of book market, then is that implying that a TCU line would have Texas favored?
At Texas.
Is that
I
implying that
my
TCU's
reaction
getting
is
points?
I hope so.
I mean,
I would love that.
I would love nothing more than to wake up on that Sunday and see like TCU plus 3.5 would be like immediately like the entire account be like, here you go, like give me point. If we're getting points with TCU, that's insane. Like God, that would be amazing. But like I think that's
Yeah,
what that line is. Like that line has to imply that it's got to be at least close. Like it's either like TCU getting points or TCU minus like 2.5 or something. Either way, we're betting that whatever that is. But
yeah,
man, just wow, that's gonna be interesting times. But yeah, maybe a play on TCU to win the Big 12 isn't bad either. Like plus 120, there's still some value there. Like they're probably gonna make the championship game, and then you're getting them at plus 120 to win the title. Like they should probably be favorites in that. Like probably minus 200 in the championship game. So
yeah.
probably some value there. Okay, our official podcast plays. So unfortunately, the official podcast plays did not go great last week, but our games, the model plays did a bit better. They were 2-7 last week. Our podcast plays were 25-20 on the season. Some bad ones that came up, but some games that were close though last week. So let's hopefully get back on track. So for me this week, I've got actually I just hit a button here. Okay, I've got for my first play, I've got Louisiana Lafayette's or as I see in Bet365 the Thursday night game, UL Lafayette at Southern Mississippi +1 or money line. Pick your poison. It doesn't really matter that much. Um, I've this UL Lafayette team is actually pretty good. Their money line's about minus 105 or the +1 is minus 110 either way you want that. I kind of just think ULEF it's a better team. They took down Marshall a couple weeks ago. Um, I'm not the biggest fan of the Southern Miss team. My model has Louisiana as a bigger favorite, and I'm kind of I don't mind taking them. It's a nice Thursday night game. I think this week's Thursday night NFL game, even though it's between the Ravens and the Bucks, it's actually secretly pretty bad. I think the Ravens should probably crush them. So yeah, give me the give me the cage Raging Cajuns against Southern Miss. I think that they could do really well in that game.
Just so you understand, you're going against the only team that's beaten Tulane this year. Don't
Uh,
say you weren't warned.
that is true. Yeah. But like I think this Louisiana team is like they've kind of found their footing recently. Like they did lose to South Alabama, but they only lost to South Alabama by 3. Then they beat Marshall by 10. Then they crushed Arkansas State by 20. Um,
Yeah,
Southern Miss only beat Arkansas State by 1, and both of them hosted them at home. So that's a huge disparity, and that's just a couple weeks apart. They're actually just literally just a week apart. And they did beat Southern Miss did beat Texas State, but only by 6. So I think I'll take the Raging Cajuns on the road.
yeah, and Louisiana, first time head coach, very very young team that lost almost everything from their really good team last season. So I could see them taking a while to figure out how to play this season. So yep, agree with you there. I'm going Illinois, and I don't know if this has moved since. I think it's might be up to 7.5 now, given 7.5 at Nebraska.
Yeah,
Does that sound right?
it's 7. I
Okay.
believe it's 7.5 now. I looked today. I could only get a 7.5. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it at 7 when it dropped on. My guy dropped it on Sunday. I just, Illinois, my model has them as a top 5 team in all of FBS. Um, my model does not have Nebraska as a top 5 team in all of FBS. Also, Illinois, by far the best defense in all of FBS this season. So I'm also taking the under 51.5.
Yeah, I really like this play too. I think I don't. I feel like I feel like the -7 and -7.5 are basically the same. Like I don't think we're gonna get to a point where Nebraska is gonna just cover. Like they're probably either gonna make this a really really close game or like Illinois is gonna blow them out. And I probably think it's probably closer to the Illinois blowout. This Illinois team is like actually sneakily pretty good. Well, not sneakily, people have kind of clued into them being pretty good. But this Nebraska team, although they're like frisky at times, they're just not as good as this Nebraska. There's not as an Illinois team this year, at least. My next play is an interesting one, kind of an oldie but goodie for me. Coastal Carolina +2 or money line at Marshall. Um, yeah, again, Coastal Carolina again, a team that my again, we said this last week. When they're either small dogs or laying small points, lay the points. But when they're big dogs, take basically bet against them. Like they were 11.5 or something point favorites against Old Dominion, lost outright. This week, short spread. You take Coastal, the +2 or the money line. I don't understand why we're giving so much, why the books are having so much faith in this Marshall team. I just don't think the books can actually figure out Coastal Carolina at all. I've got Coastal Carolina by like 10-point favorites here, and I think they're coming off a bye. I think they'll be able to figure it out and beat this Marshall team. That like I think there's a lot of still this Marshall beat Notre Dame kind of sheen on this Marshall team, and I think we're slowly beating it off in the last couple of weeks. So I think I think I think Coastal could definitely beat them.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of that win at South Bend still baked into the Marshall metrics here. I agree. I think you mentioned in part one, Coastal's kind of, like you said, when you less expect it, that's when they will win it. And if they're a dog here, getting points with them is a good spot to be in, I think for sure. My next one, it's kind of a broken record time here. And I wouldn't have, I kind of think that at some point the market's going to catch up. I did not seek this out. My model highlighted this as a play. Virginia getting 2.5 hosting Miami. I would not have picked this out. My model really likes Virginia's defense for some reason. And that's in a vacuum before we're talking about going against whatever Mario has made of this Hurricanes offense. So 2.5, I grabbed it. Would be nice to get 3. You and I have a little different feelings on that, but I'll take 2.5. I'm also playing very small bet on Virginia money line as well.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me. I like 'cause this is now 3 weeks basically. I think we had what 7.5 with Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech covered, but
Hmm.
Miami did win that game. I think they won by exactly 7 or 6. I can't remember. Duke last week, Miami was 10-point favorites, didn't cover, lost outright. We're slowly seeing these spreads come in on this Miami team. Like,
Can I pause you there?
yeah,
If you go back further, the week before that was North Carolina, which I had as a play.
hmm
The week before that, I think both of our models had this, and we just kind of said, I don't know. That was the Middle Tennessee game.
I remember I bet Middle Tennessee. I took that. I took that money line. So that was that was the one. So again, so this is so what they're what Owen whatever against the spread.
Oh, go back further because before that was the debacle at College Station. Hey, you
Yes.
lost to Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, they lost that one too. We were on Miami in that game, but then they lost.
Yes. So they are on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 game losing streak against the spread.
At least, yeah. That's yeah. I, but the thing is though, like at this point though, when you're laying 2, there's not much room left there though, right? Like that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't hate the play, but at the same time, it's kind of close. But we'll see. Anyway, next up for me, another short dog or another kind of short dog, short favorite, Cincinnati +1 money line at UCF. I don't trust this UCF quarterback at all. Um,
Wow.
I don't know why we're like I don't hate the Cincinnati team. I don't hate the Cincinnati quarterback. I feel like it was basically a backdoor cover last week by SMU. So I'm gonna try Cincinnati again. Let's see what Cincinnati can do this week.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering why my model doesn't have that. I think it goes back to, like I mentioned in part one, the Cincy offense um, is just kind of below average. But I love that matchup of the Cincy defense against John Rice Plumlee. Absolutely. That's got to be good for a pick six, right?
Definitely, yeah.
All right, my next one, Louisiana Tech at FIU. FIU, I don't know if they're still at 8. I think I've seen this down to like my guy has like the 6.5 now.
Yeah, it is 6.5. I grabbed
Yeah,
this on, I want to say Sunday at 8.5. So I got 8.5, and I got money
nice.
line too. So I'm locked and ready to go on Friday night. But yeah, I love this bet. I think this like Louisiana Tech is not a good team. Why were they laying 8.5? Like, why?
I think there's a lot of last year baked in, and FIU had a really rough start to the season. Um, it wouldn't be the first time we're ahead of the market on this. Um, Mike McIntyre got a Narduzzi at the top of this part.
Hmm.
Or no. Sorry, he got the unnarduzzi at
Got
the
the
end of part
Underdosing,
one.
yeah,
Sorry, yeah. My model doesn't have this as particularly close, and I got the money line too.
yeah. Next up for me, um, bit of an odd one here. Actually, it's up to 13.5 now, but I still don't hate the play. Arizona State minus 13.5 against Colorado. Um, Colorado beat Cal. Great. Good for them. They're not a good team. This is still a problem. Great. You had one like kind of cathartic win. Congratulations to you. This Arizona team is actually the Arizona State team has actually been not bad. And even though their bare loss to Stanford last week was not particularly bad either. So give me Arizona State here. I think they can definitely cover against a Colorado team that's they got their win. They're like, hey, we're not horrible. Now we can go back to being horrible. We're good
Yeah,
now.
they left out of that last week too. Um,
Hmm.
all right, I've got a couple of SEC overplays now for a guy who loves to play unders and actually had a deeper dive on unders. Um, this is I'll put it this way: my overs were still in beta testing, and I've gotten season and a half now, kind of where I think I'm at proof of concept. Arkansas at Auburn, I have that over 61. Don't know if that's moved since I grabbed it. And then Florida, Georgia, I have over 56 and a half. Um, Arkansas's offense is totally different with KJ Jefferson there. Their defense stinks, like we talked about in I think that was in part one. Um, so bad that I think Auburn can probably run the ball and actually score quite a bit here. Florida, Georgia, I think this is as much a play. I guess this pops on my radar because Georgia's offense is very good and probably a little bit underrated. And I think their defense is good, but not nearly as good as people think. And maybe this is really good Anthony Richardson game, or maybe this is Anthony Richardson has a really silly turnover that leads to an easy touchdown. Um, I can see either of them going happening. So two of these SEC games going over.
What I wish you could bet on like odds of a pick six. Like, could you bet like Anthony Richardson over 0.5 pick sixes, like 2 to 1 plus two
And
fifty? I'd do that.
and parlaying it with like 100 yards rushing too.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine. Um, yeah, I'm not. So what did you say for the over Georgia, Florida?
56 and a half.
Yeah, it's 56.5. Yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's and then the Arkansas Auburn is 61.5. Similar, but
Okay.
yeah, KJ Jefferson's out right for.
No, he's playing.
Oh, he's playing. Okay,
Yeah, he had a
interesting.
really good game against BYU last week.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. For my uh last play, this one gets a little ugly. And actually, I got some closing line value today. Rutgers plus 14.5 at Minnesota. It's now down to 14 actually. Yeah, it's ugly.
Yeah.
And
That's what we get this time of year, basically, right?
yeah, but like I don't think this Rutgers team is that bad, and I don't think this Minnesota team is that good. Like,
They've got injuries. Minnesota
yeah,
does.
and then
Bad injuries.
what do we have? Like, what's the track record of Minnesota being a good team this year? Right? Like, is it literally just like, oh, okay, they crushed New Mexico State. Well, that's hang the banner for that. Um, they crushed Colorado 49-7, beat Michigan State 34-7. Nothing particularly impressive. Lost by 10 points to a Purdue team that got crushed by Wisconsin. Got beat relatively badly by Illinois, a team with backup quarterback. and then got beat pretty badly by Penn State. Like it's looking like their first 4 wins of the season were against 4 pitiful teams in like New Mexico, Colorado, and Michigan State, and then they play some half decent teams and they lose. I don't like this Rutgers team's a little frisky. I don't think you want to be laying 14.5 with a team that's a little frisky. Like that's 2 full scores. Like that's
Yeah.
three scores, and I don't see them stacking that up. And I think
Uh,
Rutgers can score on them.
Frisky, and I think they will take the air out of the ball. And I think Minnesota has always been happy to take the air out of the ball, and especially with I don't think Morgan is back yet. Their quarterback, and I don't think I think Ottman Bell is out, and I think Abraham is out. Basically anybody that you kind of remembered that ever played for Minnesota is out. Their quarterback is named Ethan, which is a first for me. Nathan without the leading N. He had some pretty brutal numbers last week, and Rutgers defense is, I think, sneaky good, and Shiano's a good defensive coach. Um, yeah, I don't know if Rutgers wins this, but it's hard to see Minnesota winning by 3 scores here. Really
Yeah,
hard. I like
I
that.
with Ethan or Athon, it in there. I actually have this even. So
Yep,
so
makes sense.
because what I do for my model now is I basically look back at who did the most passing yards for your team or who did the most passing attempts for your team last week, and then I punch them in for the projections for this week. Because it's better. It's because that way I don't like because at that point I'm not going to look through like the stat sheet every week for every single college football team to figure out who it is. I just have it automatically do it. So this
Hmm.
way I'm not stuck with stats from a quarterback who's like been benched or is out for the year or something. So
Or sometimes you never find out, like we talked about in part one, the mysterious Jack Sapolek just disappeared from Western Michigan.
yeah,
No idea why. Maybe he was abducted. Um, my last one, when you're talking about rough plays at this time of the year, I really like kind of weird to say it out loud. UConn getting 8.5 at home against Boston College. This has probably moved since I've bet that.
seven
I
and a
wouldn't.
half now, but still
Yeah.
not a bad play though.
Well, I got 8.5 guys, so I don't know. Maybe I should tweet out my plays earlier.
This is the Battle of Massachusetts. Uh,
Well, Connecticut's not.
oh, you're
It
right.
would be
That's
the they border each other,
the
so they can.
border war, the Battle of the Northeast.
Yes.
Are there any other? There's got to be another Northeast team
Um,
in Division One.
Syracuse-ish.
I guess technically, I guess Rutgers is maybe.
No, come on.
Well,
They're south of Syracuse.
you can't. Well, okay, I guess.
Rutgers is south of Penn State, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it depends how you define the Northeast. If you try to use the like the definition of the Northeast by U.S. states, or like just the feeling of the Northeast,
Yes.
or like because this is for U.S. politics, it's a big thing. Like, what's the Northeast? And it's like I just pick all the blue states that are in the Northeast. I'm like, this is the Northeast. Like I'm like, yeah, Virginia's a Northeast state kind of sometimes. So, but like that's not really Northeast. So,
I
but
think if we say if it's you think of the classic fall foliage, it would just be BC and Connecticut. Yeah, that's
yeah.
it.
So then okay, so this is the Battle of the Northeast. So
Yep.
yeah,
Okay, and then if you follow me on Twitter, or if you don't, you should at BuckMetrics, BUCK metrics. I will tweet out sometime. I don't have any plays until Friday, and I already gave you guys FIU, but I will tweet out probably sometime on Friday my plays. Last week did pretty good against the spread 2-2, 16-12 for the season. Money line 2-2, but we won almost 2 units. Interestingly, we're 9-11 on the season on money line plays, but we're up 3.6 units on just 20 units played because we've had some really nice long shots there. And unders, my favorite bet, to make it clear again, 1-0, bringing us to 8-2 on unders for the season. And I'm going to, as I gave out some plays, give out overs for the first time this season as well.
nice.
All right. Should I cover the
Sure,
games where both models say go?
go ahead.
So last week these went 3-3. Very impressive, 22-13 on the season. Interesting. I think we've covered most of these. UConn hosting BC. I like that spreads, even if it's 7.5. I have UConn as basically a 4-point favorite. You've got this pretty much even. So both our models like this one. Sneaking this one in. I kind of just applied my methodology to your what your model says, and I'm getting that Nebraska Illinois under 51 and a half as a play also. I have the total at 45 and a half, and if I've got a margin of 5 and a great defense, which I do have in Illinois, especially for the road team, even better, that's a play. So I've got the total at 45 and a half. You've got the total even lower at 36. So your model likes this better than I do. And I like this one. Another one of my plays, FIU against Louisiana Tech. I've got FIU about 3.5 points better. You have FIU 18 points better than Louisiana Tech. Um, Strong signals here. No wonder you grabbed that on Sunday.
Yeah, that was.
Money line too, huh?
Yeah, I looked at that. I'm like, yep, all right. Just gonna grab that immediately. Uh, but yeah, it's and to be fair, actually, I wasn't looking at that one specifically. But yeah, no, I definitely had Florida International as the favorite. That's why I grabbed that one so fast.
Oh, and we talked about this. Another one of my plays, Virginia getting 2.5 at home. I have them as about a 6 point favorite. You've got them as about a touchdown favorite. So definitely a play there. Lastly, this was not either of our picks. I think I bet this one. I was about to check. Western Kentucky is given 9.5 to North Texas at home. We both have this about a 17-point game. So play for both of our models there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Western Kentucky, I bet them last week the -2.5. They cashed that for me. That was nice. Um, I don't know. It's a bit of an odd. I probably will find myself betting on against North Texas. But I think it could be. I think Western Kentucky is the better team there. So I think maybe again, when you see something like that, like we're like saying, yeah, it's but like three scores better. You're getting two ish, kind of like 1.5 scores. I think there's some value there. So yeah, so
Yep.
that does it for us for this week. Obviously, you can check out part one for a recap of week 8. This has been part 2 for our plays of the week, and you will obviously be back next week with a recap of week 9 and our plays for week 10. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.